Artificial intelligence is taking humans to places we couldn't go before. That's what makes this the age of with. The next question is, where can humans take AI? AI is an ecosystem we all contribute to and benefit from. The next important insight could come from anywhere. And with so much happening so fast, this ecosystem needs a focal point. We created the Global Deloitte AI Institute to answer that need. What role can AI play in my business? How can we use AI in trustworthy and ethical ways? Why isn't there more diversity in the AI workforce? How does my AI career start? And where is AI going next? The Deloitte AI Institute is leading the global conversation on AI. We are connecting businesses, universities, think tanks, policymakers, and startups. We are highlighting today's visionaries, data scientists, and emerging trendsetters. From the boardroom to the college lab, the Deloitte AI Institute is bringing forth insights and using our deep knowledge of all aspects of AI to make sense of this complex ecosystem, cutting through all the hype and providing insights to help enterprises make informed AI decisions. I'm Beena Amanat. I'm the Executive Director at the Deloitte AI Institute, where we are not just preparing to meet the AI future, we are shaping it together. Join me online to find out more. AI has been all over the news in the past few months, now more than ever. How much of it is hype versus reality? How do the most successful organizations leverage AI and data to achieve sustainable, evergreen business value? What key principles can transform digital operations and drive an ecosystem model for growth? We need to dig into common operational challenges to map out a new approach to managing AI and data to nurture continuous value. Hi everyone, my name is Beena Amanat. I lead the Global Deloitte AI Institute and our technology trust ethics practice here at Deloitte. It is my pleasure to moderate today's session on this very relevant topic. But firstly, thank you to all of you for taking time today to join us. This will be a very interactive session, so please do share your comments and questions throughout the session today, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the next 45 minutes. This will also be the first of a three-part series hosted by my colleague and friend, Jim Rowan. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Beena. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone else for joining today. By way of brief introduction, my name is Jim Rowan. I'm a principal at Deloitte Consulting and leader of our AI and data operations practice. We're really excited to talk to you across these three-part series about this concept of evergreen value when it comes to AI and data operations. We think this is core to what clients need as they continue to evolve how they use data and AI across your organization. And so we're going to unpack sort of three things across this series. The first being to mention is around evergreen principles, which we're going to talk about today with some of our panelists. And then we're going to dive into some conversations around cost transformation. How do you use AI and data as part of your cost transformation strategy? And then finally, in our last session, we're going to spend some time talking about how we think about the AI COE and what value can an AI COE create for you and your client organizations. So we think we have a great list of topics for you. The other thing that I think is really important is to ask the question, well, why is this important now? Like, why are we having this conversation? And so we've, through our research and analysis and client conversations, we've come up with sort of, I would say, three main drivers or reasons to help engage in the conversation. And first for us is around data, right? Data is pervasive everywhere. We see it, we have too much of it in our client organizations. We have disconnected aspects of our data. We have master data sitting in some systems that doesn't tie to data in another system. And ultimately, we're trying to figure out how do we make it more useful? How do we increase our return on investment for data in our organizations? We have data operations that are running, but maybe they're not creating accurate, fresh, and accessible information from our platforms. And so we really feel like that's a key challenge that clients are facing today, and something that you're going to want to try to hear about how are some challenges, how are some ways to address that going forward. The second one is really around the ways of working. So, and generative AI is a great example of this. We're dramatically changing how we interact with machines today, how the ways of working are changing in our organizations, and the types of things that our people need to be successful. And that leads in really well to this conversation around talent. We've gone through this massive amount of skills crunch. Do we have the right people with the right skills, working on the data, working on the analytics, to now challenges around how are those people going to be skilled for the next set of technologies? How are we going to enable all of our workers to be able to engage with this AI platforms that exist out there today? And so are we thinking about how to upskill them? What capabilities do they need? Are we thinking about what talent, new skills need to develop? There's an article in the journal just yesterday talking about careers impacted by generative AI. Accounting was one of the professions, and there are many others along the way. And a lot of this is this concept about how are we going to work better with the technology we're working with today, and how do we kind of adapt and change over time. Now, for all of this, data is at the core of what we're doing in these situations. We have to have that data supporting these models and creating that feedback loop to make sure that they're successful, effective, and trustworthy in our environments. So I think you're going to find this conversation really exciting, hopefully insightful along the way about what our colleagues are seeing in the marketplace around this space. And Beena, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to this group.
Jim, thank you. Now I would like to welcome Prakul Sharma to join us.
Thank you, Beena, and good day to everyone. My name is Prakul Sharma, Managing Director at Deloitte. I also lead the data operations practice for Deloitte. And the goal for our data operations practice is to really, help our clients reimagine their data operations so that they can drive that evergreen value that Jim talked about. As Jim was mentioning, I think data is crucial to kind of making sure we are able to drive the value out of anything we do from an AI perspective, analytics, and much more. Cultivating this data is key, right? What does that actually mean? Cultivating data as an investable asset. To me, it means right data at the right time for the right people. And let me decompose that for you, right? Right data. There's multiple dimensions to actually defining the right data. Are you actually defining the data in the right way? Are you actually ensuring the quality of the data is in the right way? That's actually encompassing a lot of getting the data right. Right time. Our data ecosystems are changing. We used to be a batch-oriented system, everything running at the end of the day. Now it's much more real time. Insights are real time. Actions are real time. So do we have the capabilities to actually deliver the data on time, right? So that the value of the data doesn't get stale and the actions that we get is immediate. Right people, right? There have been concerns about privacy, security. How do you ensure that you actually provide access to the people who actually need the data? And how do you do it in a much more easy way so that it's easy for them to search, easy for them to use it in different domains, whether that's core data science, whether that is just business analysts looking at data for trends. Those are the things that we are seeing as the critical items. An example here is a logistic company that we recently helped with. They went through all of these processes from defining their vendor data to their customer data clearly, from that to defining a governance organization to an operating model that will actually ensure that data is trustworthy, to building those ecosystems I was talking about with the real-time integration, to eventually operating that sustainably. So that's the key for us as the number one priority for our data operations practice.
Thank you, Prakul. And I would like to invite Alison Kufari to join us as well.
Thanks, Beena. Hi, everybody. Alison Kufari here. I'm a principal in Deloitte Consulting. I spend most of my time working with my clients to help them define and execute their transformation strategies, doing this with AI and data. I'm really happy to be here today and share with you some perspectives on some of the challenges clients have when they are looking to really drive these concepts around an evergreen enterprise, and some ideas on how they're driving collaboration and innovation in this space. So happy to be here today.
Well, here you have the entire panel. So let's start with the topic that's top of mind for everybody, right? That has just taken over the world of AI in the past few months. So the question is, how do you think generative AI solutions can be leveraged to achieve enterprise-wide evergreen value? And maybe Jim, will start with you.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Bina, you're right. It's hard to escape a news cycle without a conversation about generative AI. And I think there's this common way and fun way to engage with generative AI. I use it. My kids are using it. We're sort of thinking about how we use it in our day-to-day lives. And I think we're going to start to see that permeate across the enterprise. We heard Jensen Huang talk about this a little bit at the NVIDIA keynote as well, sort of the iPhone moment and things like that, where it's really changing, how we think about engaging across the enterprise. And so what I see our organizations starting to do is figure out what's the unique, corpus body of knowledge at that organization that's sort of inherent with that company's value that we can then, connect into or attach to a large language model to start figuring out how to drive efficiencies in and around those organizations, and really start taking time and effort out of the activities that they're doing. We've had some conversations with clients about, maybe I could leverage it to better query the data in my databases or across my systems, and not just the general. And so we've seen a little bit of the natural language processing in that front before, but now truly asking those questions and getting very simplified answers back, with some thought process around how it came to those answers and maybe a little bit of additional detail around it. So I see it sort of helping the query engage with the data, improving processes and efficiencies. And ultimately, the key part about this, again, going back to Prakul will sound like a broken record, but it goes back to the data, right? If we don't have the foundations for the data as part of this, we can't build and connect these models the way we'd want to. So those are some areas that we're seeing generative AI come into play.
Alison, what are you seeing with your clients?
Similar to Prakul and Jim, honestly, the questions are really around how do I take this technology and how do I improve my customer interactions? And honestly, how do I begin to interact with my customers in a way that's going to only improve, their trust in the services we're offering and any answers we're giving them. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done there around, the faith and the sources of truth for the data in the applications.
Yeah. And Prakul, maybe I'll ask you, on the other side of the coin, right? What are some of the biggest risks of generative AI adoption within an enterprise? We know at a high level the risks of generative AI, but what do you see from an enterprise lens?
Yeah, I think we are venturing into a new area, and one of the biggest risks I feel and that we are seeing in other clients is really in what use cases, in what capacity do you want to use generative AI, right? Jim was mentioning in terms of generating code, right? Yes, that's great, but can we use it in more of a co-pilot so that, there isn't, everything automated and nobody's actually having a check and balance system to see whether everything is coming out as it's expected to be. There's also a big brand risk in terms of use of the generative AI, right? What if these models don't generate the intended output and actually do otherwise? How do you kind of manage those things? And I think the lastly, I think to Jim's point, if data is not right, the generative AI can go in any direction. So, and especially as we are integrating, more of the edge sensors, whether those are on vehicle or others, there are reactions real in real world. So how do you manage some of those things using the broader AI and data ecosystems? That's important for us. So those are the areas that I see as bigger risks, and how our clients are trying to ask the questions at this stage to manage these risks.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And maybe, let's dive a little bit more on the data side, right? So, and Jim, coming back to you, what are some of the questions companies should be asking themselves to help accelerate along this path to achieving evergreen value?
Yeah, I mean, what we're hearing and when we're suggesting clients ask themselves is really some of the core principles around, do you have the right data governance in place? Do you have a strategy around how you're integrating your data across the various disparate parts of your organization? Do you have the right teams and processes set up in place to manage those environments over time? And are you embedding continuous improvement into some of the operations that you're setting up around those platforms? I mean, one of the things we've thought about a little bit around the data operations space is you can actually think about how you apply AI to those solutions as well. So How
Yeah.
do you make the data pipelines that you're working through, that are running through your system, the master data management that you're running through your client environments, add AI to that to help support the decision-making process, to make the data pipelines self-healing as a way to address errors in advance before they happen, things of those types of situations. So we're seeing clients embark on some of those areas. I know those are some of the questions, right? And a little bit of some of the answers that clients need to keep asking themselves. And then, are we putting the right investment behind the data? I think it's something that you don't just put a one-time investment in, but you need to think about sort of a continuous amount of investment you're going to make to drive those returns over time. And I don't think that question's being asked enough as we start to see and sort of try to use data more across the organization.
Yeah, and speaking a little bit about people and talent, right? A lot of times, maybe the people in the organization themselves are not aware of all the data that's available or exists, right?
Right.
So, Alison, what's your experience around this? How do you break down those data silos and make sure that data is available to everybody?
Veena, it's a question we get all the time, and honestly, when I think about sort of the shift in the questions I'm getting from my clients recently, the question is, how do I put AI in the hands of my people and start building solutions that are really scalable across my business? And this is a shift. 3 years ago, really the questions were around intelligent automation and how do I remove people effort from my business. Now the question is, how do I take AI and data and empower my people to really differentiate how we work with our customers? And there's challenges there. And then, of course, a lot of it comes down to the data. Most of these organizations that we work with are siloed in nature. It's the nature of large enterprises. We have distinct business units, distinct functions, and we've developed processes for these distinct functions. Most of the time, the platforms, the systems, the interaction channels are for these siloed functions. And ultimately, the data's all over the place. So when it comes to empowering our people with data, with real-time information, with recommendations on how they can grow their business and how they can, with confidence, make decisions, they often find the data's just not there. It's out there, but they might not even know where.
Prakul, what are your thoughts? What are some of the best practices around making data ready, fresh, and available?
Yeah, certainly. I think this starts with first defining your data and understanding your data, right? I see a lot of clients, the basic definitions of the data, what are the domains of the data that we have in an organization are not even clear. One unit looks at data in a different way, other units look at the data in a different way. Until those things are streamlined, that consistency across the data supply chain is hard to get. The second step, I would say, is really defining the right kind of governance in the operating model, and Jim alluded to that. There's a lot of shift right now that we are seeing in thinking of data as a product, right? Which means there are going to be ownerships around those products. They will need to enforce governance policies, controls to make sure whatever is delivered to the rest of the organizations is trustworthy. That how do you bring both the governance as well as the engineering operating models together to do that? Then comes the technology area. We've seen a lot of traction over the last few years in terms of data modernization, but I've also seen stories where the data modernizations have gone wrong because all people have done is really moved from on-prem to cloud without really transforming how they do it right. So how do you build that data platform in the right way, the right technologies to use both near real time, and batch use cases? And ultimately, how do you bring in that operating model or operations model for data that is used to then run this sustainably longer term? So those are kind of the broader steps that I see people adopting to make their data.
Yeah. This is great. So let's take a step back and talk about the evergreen value through the lens of AI and data operations. What are some of the core principles, tenets that you can share with us today, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, we've covered a couple of the principles, I think, through here. So the idea that you want to try to keep your data fresh, accessible, accurate for people to be able to consume and engage with that throughout the course of the organization's sort of life cycle of how they're working through it. You want to also make sure you have very clear alignment between the use cases, the business value, so that you're not just sort of doing things in a silo, but you're doing things in connection with what the business is trying to achieve. It's very important what we've seen. And then you're constantly like looking for continuous ways to drive improvement in the organization. So Allison talked a little bit about automation. Prakul's talked about sort of the data and analytics side of things. So you're constantly looking for ways to reinvent on that continuous improvement engine. And then the other piece to this too is like, I think finding the right partner in and around this journey. I think a lot of organizations recognize that they all don't have all the right data. So they need data partners to help you analyze the information, provide third-party information, validate vendor supplier masters are correct. They need technology partners that understand the ecosystem and alliances that are out there. They need access to the right talent in the marketplace to be able to drive some of the work they're trying to achieve as well. So those are some of the things we talk about when we talk about some of the, evergreen principles the organization should be looking for going forward.
Prakul, would you like to add?
Yeah, I'll add one thing to what Jim mentioned. This is a continuous process. This is not a once and done thing. So that mindset, bringing into the how you do all of these things, whether you're managing data, whether you're building new products, new models, that's very important. So we've seen a lot of our clients starting to adopt that product-based thinking and agile delivery, and merging that with all of the things that Jim mentioned to drive the continuous improvement and continuous value delivery.
That mindset shift, I was going to jump in, Veena. Sorry, that mindset shift on the product piece, I think, is so key for the difference that we start to see, because if you start treating data like a product, you treat it differently in the organization than if you treat it as a report or something that's sort of sitting there, right? Because we invest in our products, we expect returns from our products.
Yeah.
And when we talk about data that way, I think it really changes the lens. Sorry, but I thought passionate about that.
Yeah. So can you, Jim, that's great. Can you give an example? What does that look like for a real company?
So like if you're thinking about sort of either a life sciences company, banking, capital markets company, think about a client where you want access to specific, let's say, sales or channel information around what their customer behavior is looking like. So we can pull that together into a specific data product that might provide the insights in and around that for a client, that pulls together the information from maybe third parties as well as internal information they've collected, therapeutic area data, things of that nature, to be able to see the insights, and it's all contained within the product for the consumer, the business user to consume. I think adds value versus thinking of it as sales transaction data.
Jim, that reminds me of an example I have recently with one of my clients. We were working with their customer contact center, and their agents in the customer contact center were telling their leadership that their customers were frustrated when they interacted with them because the customers felt like they knew more about their situation, their history, their cases than the agents did. And the agents would begin to interact with these customers across a variety of channels, be it email, be it phone, be it the chat through their platforms. And they, first of all, they just didn't know who the customer was. What's the prioritization of this customer? And again, they had no background really on what issue the customer was bringing back to this organization. And they just felt that there was no accurate, real source of truth of data. They didn't have the insights into what they should be doing to help really meet that customer's demands, exceed it, hopefully, and be able to engage with them in a differentiated way. So I think we see this a lot for our frontline employees, just not having the visibility and the confidence in the data to then make decisions that they know are best for the customer and the company.
I'll just add to that.
Prakul, do you have?
Yeah, I'll just add with another real example, which is also a shift in kind of how our clients are reaching back to us and the questions they are asking. If it was 5 years back, a lot of clients would come to us and say, hey, I really need a engineering data pod to actually drive something that I have in this. Now the questions are starting to evolve. Hey, I actually need somebody who understands that particular data product. I work in the banking space. Clients come to us, hey, do you have people who know data, but who know actually how to work with loans data? What does that mean? That means they not only understand that particular domain, they understand what's happening in that industry, what are the third-party sources that can be used to enrich the data, and obviously those get complemented with engineering skills. So how do you bring this kind of a pod structure with the product mindset, with functional understanding of that particular domain and the engineering capability together to do that? That's what our clients are now starting to ask us.
Jim, would you like to share another example or a story from one of the other 5 principles?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we've talked about is sort of making it also outcome oriented. So one of the things Prakul is talking about, so you talk about this data product, that's great. We want an engineering pod to work on the data product, great, but what's the outcome? So a lot of our clients are talking about how do we reorient our contracting mechanisms to be more outcome oriented and driven towards the value that we should be creating through these conversations. So instead of running data pipelines for a year and minimizing service tickets, that's important, but how are we're actually changing that conversation to say, let's measure the output of those. So what are the insights that we're generating? What's the value we're creating from that? So we see that in examples, especially around the automation space. So where we partner with clients to figure out, what are the key areas of cost within the organization or the key areas where we want to drive efficiencies. We start to establish these automation pods to work on them and help improve those areas. But then we're looking at it from an outcome perspective, because that's really what everyone's looking for. And I think when we talk about evergreen principles and also connecting them into the third-party partners, it's tying things into outcomes so that we're not just focused on, again, to where Prakul was saying, engineering pods versus we're generating insights. That's what we want to focus on. We're generating automations to improve efficiencies. And we're seeing clients really enjoy that, because as you work across your organization, that's easier to have a conversation between IT and the business about the value you're creating, because you can see it, it's tangible, and it's linked to our savings, insights generated, value created in the organization. So those are a couple examples where we're seeing some of those things. I think, and it's really changing sort of the way we talk about working with third parties.
Jim, I couldn't agree more. And to add to that, not only does it open up a different conversation between the business and IT when we start talking about outcomes, but when we start talking about the value for the business, we open up a conversation across end-to-end business areas. And I was working with a transformation group for a specific business unit, and they had a very clear view of what they needed to do to transform and innovate and how they could bring in AI. But they said, look, we just can't make this happen because there's data missing upstream in our end-to-end value chain. And we can't make this happen, alone. And we worked with them to build the value case that they could then take to their fellow business colleagues and say, together, if we can do this, if we can build these downstream requirements into the data that you could naturally capture upstream, we could really transform and innovate what we do. And it's through that outcome plus value conversation that we open up an enterprise solution that just felt like it couldn't be done beforehand.
Yeah, great point. And we actually have a question from the audience from Mosa. And Prakul, maybe you can take this one. So his question is, how do we create a unified knowledge management strategy for artificial intelligence to build a common knowledge base across functions?
Yeah. I'll try to address this by the lens of people, process, and technology. I think that's very critical, because you don't want to. We have had SharePoints and all of these other forums for the longest time, but those are not the ones that people are really interacting with. I think there's a much more engaging model that is required here. And I'll try to allude to both the data and the AI side here. So, for example, when we talk about the data, we are right now building, designing, and deploying catalogs that actually are much richer than just doing a data dictionary for a particular data. That actually brings in the business insights related to that data, what that particular field is. People are commenting on those to say, hey, how do you actually use those things to actually drive those values? Now you extend that to AI, it's the same process. How do you actually, when people are working with certain models, certain problem areas, how do you actually generate that whole knowledge base, and how do you actually take it in a much more interactive forum? So that process of bringing these things together, and with tools and technologies like the catalogs, evolving, kind of a next version of SharePoints, and then augmenting it with some of the generative AI technologies to really drive to the right answer. That's something that at least I am starting to see our clients go from a knowledge management strategy. From a technology perspective, it could be accomplished in multiple ways. We've had clients build knowledge graphs, those kind of next gen things to actually bring this whole knowledge base to life and get in the hands of people who really are using data.
Thank you, Prakul. We have another audience question, and this is from Neha. And I'll abbreviate the question. We realize that the right data is required to make the right decisions in this world where data is everywhere. How do we maintain data authenticity?
Yeah, maybe I could take a stab at that, and I look for my colleagues here for a little bit of help as well. I think a lot of this is getting a good sense of data lineage. So you need to understand what the source is when you talk about data lineage, and understanding sort of what path it's taken through the organization, where we've added things to the data as it's moved on. And ultimately, when we talk a lot with clients about data cataloging programs, along with the data lineage programs, it gives them a verified or validated catalog of information that they can pull from with data sets that they feel confident in to do the reporting and analytics. So we see that as a core part of some of the foundational data programs we're doing. And I think Prakul landed this really well. We're talking about, I moved my data to the cloud, or I've done a migration. There are a lot of things that clients are doing today with those activities. And with those activities, we also need to look at the cataloging aspects, the governance aspects, the master data management aspects that really are critical for us to drive value from the data that we're investing so much in.
And just adding to that, Jim, I think absolutely there. I think that's the lineage of the data, the quality aspect of the data. What at least I'm seeing is a term that is being used in the market is called the certification of that data.
Yep.
And that actually guarantees that, hey, whoever is the data owner has gone through all the troubles and the efforts to make sure whatever they are now delivering to the rest of the organization is certified to be consumed within the parameters that have been set by the organization. That's a process that's active, working in a lot of our clients.
So let's just change gears a little bit, because for all of this to work, talent and resources are crucial, right? And maybe Allison, you can help us understand a little bit on how do you address for talent and resource limitations? What are some of the things that you've learned? And examples would be great.
Sure. When we look at addressing some of the limitations, I think we have to understand really where do some of the limitations live. And I spoke a little bit about function silos and really the priorities that happen within individual business units, leaders, organizations. Oftentimes what we see when it comes to AI and data is that business leaders have their priorities. They have the metrics that they're judged on and that they're measured against. And ultimately, they're focused on driving initiatives to help them meet their goals. What we end up having is pockets of AI and data capabilities within individual functions and business teams, and these are teams that are just completely tied to our business leaders, and they're held in very high regard by these business leaders because they're the right hands. But ultimately, what ends up happening when we look across an enterprise is that we have talent pockets for AI and data capabilities. And these pockets are, as I said, really focused on what's ahead of them for their business unit leaders. They're not oftentimes looking at how do we scale our capabilities. Oftentimes these teams are organized by specific technologies. And so gaining maturity and more emerging and more mature and complex solutions, it just becomes harder to scale. Ultimately, for an enterprise, it also becomes more expensive. And so when we look at talent limitations, part of it is just recognizing what do we need at the enterprise level, not within my own business unit or function, and how do we partner with the right partners who are incentivized to drive innovation and to be flexible with us to build the right capabilities quickly.
Yeah, and you bring a great point, Allison. How should companies bring their vendors along on their AI and data journeys? what mindsets and agreements need to change in order to strengthen those connections, because we live in this world where you need a strong ecosystem of vendors, partners, alliances. So what are some of the best practices there? Maybe Jim will come to you with that question.
Yeah, I think like this landscape, technology landscape, continues to change dramatically. And you used to look at those data charts and architecture diagrams going left to right, and there'd be a few boxes and a few lines and a few vendors on that page. And then, over the past 15 to 20 years, that's gotten a very crowded space, and you can't really fit it onto single pages unless you have a microscope to see all the different vendors and interplays and who's the best of breed in each of the individual intersections, on top of multiple levels of technology stacks from on-prem versus cloud, versus some of the edge AI capabilities that we've talked about as well. So super complex, right, would be one of the ecosystem things. And I think organizations really need to take an approach that's around partnership with these vendors to understand, both be part of the roadmap and bring them part of their journey as well, because I think you're going to see continuous innovation in and around these spaces. And if you sort of leave it to the vendor by themselves, I think you're going to miss the opportunity where you can co-innovate with them and really generate a substantial amount of value. So I'd be looking for technology partners in and around those spaces where you're co-innovating in each of the different aspects of the architecture. And you're also looking for architectural standards that are open so that you can have multiple different ways to interact with them, back to more of API type of integrations, so that you're able to move data in and out of your environments or in and out of applications efficiently and effectively. And that you're not, stuck in a specific part, or, stuck in a specific area and not able to access information, generate the reports you want, or produce sort of the flow of data through the organization. So those are a couple of things that we're seeing being, effective strategies in around the ecosystem and alliances part.
And Jim, I'll add a different.
Prakul, would you like to add if you have any,
Yeah, I'll add a different lens to all of this. As you know, there's a lot of young blood coming into the industry now. And our new generation is much more. They have much more ease to work with the new technologies, use Gen AI and other things to work with that. And I think that's an area we should invest in, because that's where the next wave of talent is going to come in. How do we integrate these? We're talking about the Gen AI and what are the risks and other. How do we integrate those practices into doing work with our talent? That's something we as Deloitte are investing a lot in our talent, to make sure they are not just able to code, but how do they become much more efficient with that, using co-pilots and other aspects available to that.
Prakul, when I'm listening to your comments here, what I'm thinking about is, initially, when you asked your question, I was thinking more of our core technology capabilities and technology talent. And Prakul, when you're talking about the new generation coming in, what I'm reminded of is our questions that we're getting from clients are really around, how do I upskill my day-to-day business people as well? And we know that adoption of AI solutions and becoming comfortable with how these solutions can help people in their day-to-day work is really critical too. So thinking of talent, not just in your technology department, but the talent of your people day-to-day who, again, interact with your customers and are coming up with new products and new ways of working. How do we make them feel more comfortable to experiment and to really provide feedback onto these AI solutions? And I think that's critical in the talent development as well, is not just thinking of those who traditionally are in a technology role.
That's great. And unfortunately, we are down to the last 5 minutes. Time just flies, right? And, I think we have audience joining from all over the world, right? From Greece and India to the US. So, very engaging conversation, as always, talking to you, Jim, Prakul, and Allison. But Jim, would you like to, share some of the key takeaways and the next event?
Yeah, I'd love to try to summarize. I mean, it's been a lot that we've covered. So let me maybe start with the last sort of topic first, and then we'll go through a couple of them. The talent and people aspect of everything that we do is so important. And I think for organizations to think about Evergreen and how their organization continues to adopt these principles, the core of that is having a foundation around our people. People are going to be working with these generative AI technologies. They're going to need to be learning the new technologies, figuring out how to work with them better, and make them part of what they're doing. And so I think like number one in my mind is key takeaway about making sure talent is a core foundation around these strategies going forward. Number two for me, sort of coming out of the conversation, I think was really around this concept of, again, the data product piece of how do we increase the value of data in the conversation? How do we treat it like a product in the organization? And how do we drive sort of outcomes based around that, both from our contracting, through our partnerships, through our ecosystem relationships, to make sure we're really focusing on the value. And I think the third thing for me sort of coming out of this again was really like how important this is a foundational conversation for everything we want to do at AI. We've talked so much about the capabilities, the possibilities of AI, the risks as well, right? We've covered some of those things and some of the factors to address them, but without the core foundations around data and those capabilities, it makes the AI journey far more challenging to go after and sort of sends you back around full circle to fix the data if you don't address the AI components, don't address the data components along the way. So those are some of the key themes I think, the group covered, and I think, great conversation. So really appreciate everyone sharing.
So thank you all for joining. And I know we have our next session coming up. Jim?
Our next session is May 2nd. Very excited. We're going to talk a lot about this idea of cost transformation and how you embed AI and data into the cost transformation aspects of what you're doing so that you can really generate continuous improvement from that. So excited to get a couple of leaders on the phone and talk about that next time.
Well, thank you to our audience for joining us, and see you all again on May 2nd. Thank you, Jim, Prakul, and Allison, for making this a very engaging discussion. Take care, all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Artificial intelligence is taking humans to places we couldn't go before. That's what makes this the age of with. The next question is, where can humans take AI? AI is an ecosystem we all contribute to and benefit from. The next important insight could come from anywhere, and with so much happening so fast, this ecosystem needs a focal point. We created the Global Deloitte AI Institute to answer that need. What role can AI play in my business? How can we use AI in trustworthy and ethical ways? Why isn't there more diversity in the AI workforce? How does my AI career start? And where is AI going next? The Deloitte AI Institute is leading the global conversation on AI. We are connecting businesses, universities, think tanks, policymakers, and startups. We are highlighting today's visionaries, data scientists, and emerging trendsetters. From the boardroom to the college lab, the Deloitte AI Institute is bringing forth insights and using our deep knowledge of all aspects of AI to make sense of this complex ecosystem, cutting through all the hype and providing insights to help enterprises make informed AI decisions. I'm Beena Amanat. I'm the Executive Director at the Deloitte AI Institute, where we are not just preparing to meet the AI future, we are shaping it together. Join me online to find out more.